What time is it?
It's not working. Good evening and welcome this evening to our Bhagavad Gita discussion. We are in chapter 18 and we're actually nearing the end of the chapter. So before we begin, I will open our discussion with the mantras which demonstrate our respect and gratitude to our teacher or teachers, those who are illuminating our path with the torchlight of knowledge. Om Jnana Timaram Dasya Vinanjana Shalakaya Chakshuro Miritam Jena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapodam Didam Namao Vishnu Padaya Vishnu Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Vastitya Vishatharine Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Good evening. So nice to have your association, Eleonora, Jai Krishna, Bharat, Gokula Priya. Thank you for your association this evening in our Krishna Katha, discussion of Krishna's instructions in the Bhagavad Gita. We are on the 18th chapter, which means we have gone through almost the entirety of the Gita, and I feel greatly fortunate to have had that opportunity to share with you, and all of your comments and observations, etc., for posterity's sake, has been recorded to YouTube. So you can spread the word if anyone would like to participate in the YouTube format of hearing Bhagavad Gita discussion. That's available. So let us begin where we left off. I believe, and Eleonora, please correct me if I'm wrong, I believe we're on 45.
Perfect. 46 now.
46, okay. I was close. So chapter 18 is entitled The Perfection of Renunciation. Text 46 of that chapter. By worship of the Lord, who is the source of all beings and who is all pervading, a man can attain perfection through performing his own work. And that's really the sum and substance, isn't it, of the dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna. Arjuna was looking to give up his duty, his dharma, his work, his nature. Krishna is saying, this is your nature. And Krishna directly intervened by saying, no, you can't do that. Your thinking or your mindset is erroneous, because you're thinking that giving up your duty is the way to attain happiness, and that's quite the opposite, which is a very revolutionary take on spirituality. Krishna is saying here that you, through your dharma, through your responsibility, through your nature, you can do your work. The only thing you have to do is you have to click that little switch in your mind and see it as an offering. Jagnarta karmano nyatra, loko yam karma bandhana. That work, that sacrifice that you were performing, done as an offering to the Supreme, that is freeing. But work that is done without that mindset is bonding. It bounds us to this material world. So here again, Krishna is saying that you see in regards to your work, your duty, your dharma as an offering to Krishna, the Supreme. And that by that you attain perfection. So Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, worshiping Krishna, he's paraphrasing here, worshiping Krishna by one's own prescribed work, offering it to him while thinking within one's mind, may my Lord be pleased by this work. See the mindset? May my Lord be pleased by this offering. So even, in everyday life, you invite somebody over, what are you thinking? Say you invite somebody over for lunch. You say to them, I hope this meal is satisfying or is, pleasing to you. That's your desire. You invite someone over so that they didn't like the lunch. You invited them so they're enjoying the lunch. So that's a natural mindset. It's a natural quality that we possess. So in relationship to the Supreme, it's the same thing. I hope, my Supreme Lord, this offering is to you, and please, I hope that it is done with the proper mindset so that you are satisfied. So Arjuna had to hear that and hear the whole instruction of the Bhagavad Gita, all 700 verses of it. We haven't quite reached the 700 mark yet, but quite close. 675 verses maybe we've gone through so far. And this has been the point that Krishna repeatedly makes. Act, work as an offering with me in mind. Nishkama karma yoga. Nishkama means without desire to enjoy for yourself, but as a desire, have that desire, that burning desire in your heart to offer it to the Supreme. And that becomes your perfection. What if one possesses the nature and qualities of work of one Varna, but wishes to perform the work of a different Varna? So Baladev Vidyabhushan asks that question of us. Maybe a question we have. I have a particular nature, maybe I'm business oriented, or maybe I like to labor or do service to others. Maybe I have that inclination, but I really want to do something else. I mean, isn't that what people go through all the time? They're involved in one kind of action or work, and they're thinking about changing jobs or changing career paths, etc. Now, in one sense, it may be right because they may have chosen the wrong path. I know several people in the history of my life who went to law school, and once they graduated law school and passed the bar exam and got into the actual business of law, they hated it. They lasted a very short time. I was just reading someone's description of that, where they didn't last but a few weeks, doing law because they just didn't like it. Probably wasn't their nature, to sit in. I certainly wasn't mine. I was fortunate. I didn't go to law school. I was destined to go to law school. I took the law boards, which is a preliminary requisite to enter law school. But when I got to thinking about what I would actually be doing, I realized that is not my nature, to be cooped up in an office 60, 70 hours a week. And fortunate for me, I did not take that path, but actually took the path which, unbeknownst to me at the time, was more my nature, which was teaching. Became a teacher in high school, and realized I liked that exchange with students. So you change career paths or you change lifestyle when you realize that this particular lifestyle is not serving my ultimate interest, my best interest. And what is that best interest? Ultimately, it's your spiritual path. Because while we are embodied, that's only temporary. Our eternal path, our eternal road is back home, to go back to the spiritual world, to reconnect with the Supreme Soul. So anything which facilitates that is beneficial. Anything which takes away from that is detrimental. It's a simple principle. Quite often, we miss the simplicity of it. Just to do in our life whatever is most beneficial for us to reconnect with our eternal position, our eternal nature, because there's Dharma, but there's also Sanatan Dharma. And Sanatan Dharma means your eternal duty, your eternal responsibility. And who can answer that question? What is my eternal responsibility? But if you're fortunate enough to have understood the point of Bhagavad Gita, you can answer that question. And so then there should be no hesitation, because according to the directions and the directives that are given by Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, you utilize what you have to reconnect with your eternal nature and thus your eternal duty in service to the Supreme. That's bhakti. And that's why Krishna says in the 6th chapter, the end of the 6th chapter, that of all the yoga systems, the most complete and most perfect is engaging all that you do, all that you have, all the work, all the austerities, everything, all the charities that you give, engage that as an offering. And that becomes your perfection. Text 47, and Krishna makes it plain here. It is better to engage in one's own occupation, even though one may perform it imperfectly, than to accept another's occupation and perform it perfectly. Duties prescribed according to one's nature are never affected by sinful reactions. And then text 48 completes that thought. Every endeavor is covered by some fault, just as fire is covered by smoke. Therefore, one should not give up the work born of his nature, O son of Kunti, even if such work is full of fault. Now herein, a previous acharya, a previous spiritual master, Srila Baladev Vidyabhushan makes this comment. Krishna confirms that all prescribed duties, not only the work of a kshatriya, contain faults or smoke, which what he's referring to, apparent faults, contain faults or smoke. That's the metaphor that's being used. Even a Brahman's work has defects. One should therefore cleanse away the faulty part of one's duty by offering the duty to the Supreme Lord. And for the sake of self-realization, one should serve, giving careful attention to that part of his duty which gives rise to knowledge. So, fire is a pure element, but it produces smoke, which is not considered a pure element. So fire can be covered by smoke, but the purity of fire is not contaminated because smoke is there. Smoke is a byproduct. So when we working, there may be, the analogy that's used is like, Prabhupada had mentioned this in one of his commentaries. He says that a businessman may have to tell a white lie. This is the best product. I know, Jai Krishna, you being the consummate salesman and having been very successful in sales in your life, you know what this is all about. This is the best product. How can you sell it if you don't believe it, if you're not committed to the best product, giving them the best car or the best house, or if you're a realtor? Sadly, Jai Krishna says sadly. But the point being is there is no fault when you're doing your duty. Just like a Kshatriya, Arjuna felt that his role as a Kshatriya in killing was a fault. But because it was being done as an offering to Krishna, then Krishna removes or cleanses the fault away. So even someone who is a Vaishya, a businessman, tells us a white lie, that person who is offering the results of their activities to Krishna, the fault, the smoke is cleared away. So Krishna repeatedly and very definitively tells us this, that fault that is there that is taken away once one develops the mindset. What is the mindset? Dear Lord, I'm engaged in my occupational duty so that I may achieve my sanatan duty, my eternal duty in service to you. So even whatever I'm doing as a Vaishya, as a businessman, a mercantilistic man or woman, or as a Kshatriya, a warrior or administrator, or as a Brahmin, intellectual or a priestly class of man, or as a Sudra, one who by performance of their work is in service to mankind, in service to humanity. No matter what it is, there will be some inherent fault in it, but that fault is disregarded when the consciousness is proper. So rather than us renouncing, Krishna says, do it, but do it as an offering, and everything will be purified. It will all be purified. 49. One who is self-controlled and unattached, and who disregards all material enjoyments, can obtain, by practice of renunciation, the highest perfect stage of freedom from reaction. So it is this detachment, even when we're of the world, doing our business or doing our administrative duties or our teaching duties or our service to humanity in the capacity of Sudra, then we are detached. This is an important aspect to understand of what Krishna is saying here. We do it, we do our duty, and we're detached from it. It's not like we're trying to always figure out what's going on, how I'm to do this. Is this? No, we find our service, our occupational duty, we perform it, and we cultivate, and it's an important word, we cultivate the proper perspective. The Latin word spec means to see. Perspective means that we see it in proper order. And then Krishna accepts that. And the result of Krishna accepting that offering is that if there is any fault in the endeavor, it's purified. You're purified from it. It's not like we become haughty, proud or and do things. Oh, don't worry, Krishna's going to forgive me. That's not what's being meant here. What's being told to us here is that you do it in good consciousness with the right intention. And even then, if there's some fault, not that you purposely do things with fault, but if you do it with the right intention, if there is some imperfection in the execution of your duty, Krishna will purify that offering. Just as fire, when something comes in contact with fire, fire is considered the purest of the elements. The effect of fire coming in contact with something is it purifies water, doesn't it? When we boil it, like in our household, we not only purify water, with a water purifier, but we also boil the water. And at first, and this was my wife's directive, and at first I just thought, well, the purification, just in case there's any kind of living entities in there or whatever the case may be. But my wife also said, according to Ayurveda, even water has to be digested. So something raw, fruits, vegetables, etc., is harder to digest than something that comes in contact with fire. So even water comes in contact with fire, it is better assimilated within the body. So the fire of purification has significant and profound ramifications. So when we put our duty, our activity into the fire of purification through the offering, then even if there's some fault, then Krishna purifies that fault. Okay, text 50. O son of Kunti, Learn from me how one who has achieved this perfection can attain to the supreme perfectional stage, Brahman, the stage of highest knowledge, by acting in the way I shall now summarize. These verses that are coming up refer to a yogi on the path of Jnana Yoga who has purified his consciousness through work and has thus already progressed upward from the stage of karma to the stage of jnana. It can be progressive. So when in the karma yoga stage, we can progress as a result of executing our duties in karma yoga, offerings, rituals, sacrifice, charity, etc. Then consciousness can become purified and one can ascend to the platform of jnana yoga. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, in his comment to text 49, explains the following. It being the case that all work is covered with fault, the person on the first level of sannyas rejects the faulty aspects of work, namely the mentality of being the doer and the expectation of profit. Thus, in due course of time, he perfects his sadhana. After having ascended to the level of yoga, he gives up work itself. This is the second stage of sannyas, as described in this verse, beginning with asakta buddhi sarvatra. Thus, we can understand that a devotee who has worshipped the Lord by his work will not attain Brahman realization in the same way as does the Jnana yogi. A devotee, after being purified by detached work, attains freedom from false ego and moves forward to realize and serve the Supreme Brahman. So the distinction is being made. In Jnana Yoga, one wants to enter into Brahman. And we've discussed what is Brahman many times during the courses of our discussions. But what Krishna, or what is being said here in the commentary, is that a devotee, one in bhakti yoga, wants to serve Brahman rather than to merge into Brahman. So that's a very distinct difference. One does not want to become sugar, but one wants to taste sugar. A very famous sadhu from the Kashmiri Brahmin discipline said that. I do not want to become sugar. I want to taste sugar. So a devotee says, I do not want to merge into Brahman and become the oneness, but I want to serve the source of Brahman, Param Brahman. That is my desire. And by doing so, by engaging in service to Param Brahman, or the Supreme Brahman, one attains freedom, all freedom. One is purified and attains the perfectional stage of Bhakti Yoga. What is the perfectional stage of Bhakti Yoga? Well, preliminarily, it's knowledge. But then when one goes to the higher levels of Bhakti, it is love, prema, pure love, and thus a very intense desire for service to the Supreme. And the quintessential example of that is Radharani. That we see in Radharani in the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, when Radharani is interacting with Krishna, her intense desire is not to get some reward, but is to please Krishna, regardless. And you've all heard the story about Krishna having a headache. I think I told that story before. Krishna has a headache. Narad Muni comes to him and says, how can I help you, to get rid of this headache? Of course, this is Leela. We understand. Does God get a headache? No. But anyway, this is one of Krishna's pastimes. And Narad Muni says, what can be done to alleviate what you're experiencing from this headache? And Krishna says, The only thing that will help me is the dust from the lotus feet of my devotee. So Narada Muni says, wow, that's a big order. What devotee is wanting to scrape the dust off the bottom of their feet so that you can put it on your head? And Krishna says, that's my cure. Can you please see if you can find that devotee that will do that? So to make it's a kind of a longish story, but to make the long story short, Narada Muni goes to Brahma, he goes to Shiva, he goes to many of the different personalities, along the spectrum of devotion. And none of them, they're all like, oh no, I'm not gonna do that. I'll go to hell. So finally, when Narada Muni reports back to Krishna, no, everyone's afraid. Everyone's feeling that they'll be eternally damned for committing such a heinous offense. And Krishna says, have you gone to the gopis? And Narada Muni said, no, I didn't go to the gopis. So Krishna says, try the gopis. So Narada Muni goes back to the gopis, chief of which is Srimati Radharani. And he explains Krishna's dilemma. He's got this headache, and the only thing that will cure his headache is the dust from the lotus feet of the devotee. So immediately Radharani, other gopis, immediately they're scraping the dirt from their feet. Now you have to understand that they're cowherd girls. So they're traipsing around Vrindavan barefooted. So, they've got a lot of accumulated dust of braj there. So they're willingly giving it to Narada Muni. And Narada Muni is like shocked because there was not a fraction of a second of hesitation on their part. Not one fraction of hesitation. They immediately said, yes, take it. And Narada Muni, in his surprise, says to them, aren't you afraid that you will go to hell for this offense? Their response, let us go to hell. Our only desire is that Krishna is not suffering. So if that's what it takes for us to go to hell, fine. I'm fine with that. So Narada Muni, in his amazement, he takes the dust and he goes back to Krishna. And when Krishna hears this, a very pleased smile comes across his face. Because what Krishna was trying to establish in this Leela is what total surrender means on the highest level, on the highest platform. And therefore, he wanted to demonstrate eternally to the world the glories of the devotion, the devotional heart of the gopis. So this is a wonderful story and, lesson to be learned. Text 51 through 53, a couple of texts strung together. Being purified by his intelligence and controlling the mind with determination, giving up the objects of sense gratification. Remember, these are directives going towards Jnana Yogis. So let's read it again with that in mind. Let's keep that in our minds. Being purified by his intelligence and controlling the mind with determination, giving up the objects of sense gratification, being freed from attachment and hatred, one who lives in a secluded place, who eats little, who controls his body, mind, and power of speech, who is always in trance and who is detached, free from false ego, false strength, false pride, lust, anger, and acceptance of material things, free from false proprietorship, and peaceful. Such a person is certainly elevated to the position of self-realization. And Srila Prabhupada mentions the result of a yogi's adherence to these practices in his purport. Thus, when he is completely free from false ego, he becomes non-attached to all material things. And that is the stage of self-realization of Brahman. Total detachment. That stage is called the Brahma Bhuta stage. Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma na sochati na kamshati. At this stage of Brahman realization, one is happy and free. You know, people throughout history, we've always had a bohemian aspect of our society, haven't we? And they've had the ability to understand, you know, being embroiled in the constraints of a social norm, kind of give up your sense of freedom. And so they create an alternative sense of freedom, which means you reject the norm and don't conform. But what Krishna is telling us is that detachment means freedom from possessiveness. That is real detachment. Rupa Goswami states that, I believe, in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, that detachment just doesn't mean walking away from the world as it is, but it means freedom from the mindset of being possessive. What does possessive mean? I am this body, I am this mind, and everything in relationship to my body and mind is mine. I own it. I possess it, which is part of the illusion of the false ego. To think that we come into this world naked. Has anyone here come into the world fully clothed with earrings or hat or blouse or trousers or shoes and socks? Everyone's come into the world naked. And we would leave the world naked if they didn't dress up the dead body at the time of death. I know that's a big thing nowadays. You know, I come from an Italian-American background, and it's a big thing. You know, they call it, and I'm sure Jai Krishna, you can relate to this, the viewing, where you go see the body and you pay your respects. Is that what they do in Argentina, Eleanor? Yeah, same thing, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
We call it velorio.
Benorio?
Velorio, velorio,
Oh,
Velorio. Velorio.
velorio,
Yeah.
velorio.
Coming
Uh-huh.
from velar, which will be like guard or accompany, while supposedly, well, Christians do not say that the soul is leaving the body or anything like that. So I don't know. The real thing is that came into into rule because people were buried alive when,
Oh,
yeah, when
there was a
they
mistake.
because they didn't prescribe correctly epilepsy or those kind of uh, sickness that can make you look like dead and
Yeah,
you're
causes loss of consciousness, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
So that's why this velorio came to be a rule.
Very practical, I would say. And
Yeah,
they even have instances, I've read stories of where a person was laid out in the casket and then they kind of sit up.
I
Of
have
course,
a
that could,
very old drawing. Well, maybe it's not that old, but maybe it's 1800s, where there was kind of a little rope attached to a bell that will go inside the casket, so that if the person was buried in the wrong way, could ring the bell.
It's funny you mentioned that because I believe I read a story, a contemporary story of that actually happened. The
Because
mother
I think,
died, huh? It
because
was
I
in
think
it was in South America also.
that I don't know, but I know that the drawing is original. It's not that you make now a drawing something like that, like joking or whatever. No, no, no. Some places they did that.
Yeah. What I'm saying is I read a story of a recent occurrence of that. Apparently, it was somewhere in South America. I don't know, Ecuador, Peru, someplace like that, where the mother passed away. She wasn't that old, maybe in her 50s or 60s. They thought that she had passed away, but apparently they followed that tradition. And they put a bell in the coffin, I guess, following the tradition that you're mentioning. And when they did the viewing, velorio, and everyone paid their respects, in our tradition, in Italian American tradition, all the family sits there and cries the whole time, and the friends come in and pay their respects and genuflect, and then come to the family and offer their condolences. And then you sit for a while, and then either the priest, I'm usually, if it's a close family member, I'm usually designated to say something because everybody knows that, my life has been dedicated to understanding the nature of the soul and service to God. But, it goes on like that. But this particular occurrence, which was condemned, the woman was perceived to be dead. She went unconscious and showed very little symptoms of life, or maybe was in a village environment where they didn't have the sophistication to think anything differently, and they just were going to bury her. And as they were putting the coffin into the ground, they heard the bell ringing. Can you imagine? I couldn't imagine, but they heard the bell ringing, and they opened the path, and the mother sat up and saved. And
Yeah.
that really is being saved by the bell, right?
That's a good one.
Probably,
That's a good one.
probably if we do an etymological study of that phrase, "saved by the bell," it might come from an instance such as
Maybe,
that.
maybe I should do that. Yeah, maybe.
Yes, yes,
The
please, please, if you come up with it, let me know, okay?
I gotta
what you
admit
forgot,
that's a good line. Saved by the Bell. That's a good one.
what you
I,
forgot
I,
is the group of men usually that gather in a corner and tell black jokes.
yes, that's still done. My family gets in the back and they either make fun of the deceased person, or tell some of the funniest jokes I've ever heard were at a funeral. So that's the nature. And you look in some other cultures, like down in New Orleans, and the Irish, and I know particularly those two cultures, they really party it up at a funeral. They're
Well,
really
that's
into.
nice. That's a way to celebrate. I like that.
Yeah, because I think that's the way you want to see people happy. I wouldn't want to see people sad that I was gone. I mean, the natural
It doesn't
course
mean
of
that they do
events took
not.
place.
Yeah, of course. It's
You know,
not that
and then
they are
it's
happy that I'm gone, but be happy to celebrate my going away.
that's right. That's right. Don't worry, be happy. Okay. Let's move on here. 54. We're getting close here. One who is thus transcendentally situated at once realizes the supreme Brahman and becomes joyful, fully joyful. He never laments nor desires to have anything. He is equally disposed toward every living entity In that state, he attains pure devotional service to me. So this is thus when one is completely free from false ego, and false ego means misidentification that the body is me. And everything, when the perspective is tainted by that notion, by that understanding that the body and mind are me, that's called the development. That's when false ego develops. So that's when he is completely free from that misconception, false ego. One becomes non-attached to all material things. Because I am what follows, this is mine. If I am man and you are woman, then, or vice versa, then the next thing is in my I-ness, who I am, then I possess things. I possess another person via relationship. I possess my car, my bank account, my house, my children, my fame, my reputation, etc. All of that is linked to the body-mind complex. So being free from false ego means I am not the body. I don't know how many times Prabhupada has lectured, thousands of times, 6,000 to 7,000 lectures in the course of his life, maybe even more. I don't know how many times he honed in on that single point. Why? Because we cannot progress unless and until we fully understand that principle and are committed to that principle. The principle of not being the body, but being the pure soul, pure consciousness, which for a short period of time inhabits the mind-body complex and uses it as a means of expressing consciousness. Because the body is only a mechanism, a vehicle. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Yantra Rudhani Mayaya. It's a machine made of material energy. What's the purpose of that machine? It's a machine which its sole and whole purpose is to express the level of consciousness that soul has achieved, either through transmigration or through karma. And why I make the distinction, transmigration, because animals and lesser forms of life, species of life, do not incur karma. They are simply hooked into transmigration of the soul, which means that the soul goes from one level of life to the next higher level of life, to the next higher level of life, and so on and so forth until the soul transmigrates to the human species. Then, and only then, is one accountable. And what is the accountability system that has been set up? The law of karma. Because prior to that, the soul is not subject to the law of karma. A dog does not get a karmic reaction for biting you. My dog has bitten everyone in our family, with the exception of my son. He is not going to get karmic reaction for that. That's just his broken china. Because he's a rescue. He's been in a shelter ever since he was a puppy, and then we got him at 2 years old, and it took him time to adjust to us. But is he going to get karmic reaction for biting me in my hand? No. He will just transmigrate. And what is really very cool is the fact that this dog, every day of his life, since he's moved into our household, every day of his life, he hears the chanting of japa, and he gets prasadam every day of his life. So Prabhupada says that's not ordinary. It's an unordinary thing for a dog. And a dog or a lower species of life can actually jump over their next level of ascension into the human form of life if it's consistent throughout the rest of his life. If he stays with us for the rest of his life until he departs, and every day he hears the chanting of japa, hears the chanting of the holy names, and he's taking prasadam, remnants of food that has been offered to the deities here in our household, then good chance that that dog can achieve minimally the highest stage of evolution, transmigration, which is into the human form of life. And then he starts getting karma for biting. So if he bites as a human being, then there's karmic reaction. But while he's so that's the nature of things. Yeah. So that means completely free from false ego, becomes non-attached to material things, and that is the stage of self-realization of Brahman, and that stage is called the Brahmabhuta stage. One who is thus transcendentally situated at once realizes the supreme Brahman becomes joyful, fully joyful. He never laments, nor desires to have anything. He is equally disposed toward every living entity, that equal vision, equally disposed to all living entities. In that state, he attains pure devotional service unto the Supreme Lord. So this next verse is very important verse in the progression of thoughts that Krishna shares with us, quite often quoted. This is text 55. One can understand me as I am. So Krishna is speaking here. One can understand Krishna as he is, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, only by devotional service. And when one is in full consciousness of me by such devotion, he can enter into the kingdom of God. That's why in previous discussions that we've had, I mentioned the three manifestations of Brahman. The actual Brahman, the oneness, the imperishability, immortality, the underlying spiritual principle behind all life. That is one way it is perceived. The supreme Brahman, the eternal existence, is one way it is perceived. And the mechanism or the method that one can get to that level of perception is through Jnana Yoga. The second level of perception is that Brahman in the form of the super soul within the heart, Paramatma. We've discussed this too, so we're just bringing up these things that we've discussed previously. So every living entity has two souls residing in it. The primary soul, the jiva, the part and parcel, the finite living entity, which is possessed of Brahman qualities of eternity, knowledge, and bliss, but is finite, and seated in the heart area next to the jiva, the soul, is the supreme soul in his expansion as super soul. And that's why Krishna says that super soul is the sanctioning agent. That super soul sanctions. Sarvasya chaham ridi sanivishto matak smritir jnanam aponam cha. Krishna says in the 15th chapter, 15th verse, I am seated in everyone's heart. From me comes remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. So that means Krishna is reciprocating in the form of the intelligence to remember or to forget. Smaram, Sarvasicham, Ridi Sani Vishto, in the heart. Matak Smritir, remembrance, Jnanam, knowledge, Monam Cha, forgetfulness. So remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. I'm the source of that. And Krishna in the heart, as Super Soul, as Paramatma, is the sanctioning agent. We do the endeavor within the field, the performer of the work. Within the field, the performer of the work is the soul. Within the field, the body makes the endeavor in the world. And then everything, all that is done is sanctioned by Paramatma. So we can have the realization of Paramatma through Dhyana Yoga. Now, Dhyana Yoga is the yoga of meditation. And Dhyana Yoga is actually a division of Jnana Yoga, the yoga of knowledge. So when one does Dhyana Yoga, as is mentioned in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, then there is yamas, niyamas, asana, pranayam, atyahara, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. The levels, the stages, the eightfold Ashtanga system. Then when one goes through that evolution of steps or levels in meditation, in the yoga of meditation, Dhyana Yoga, one can realize within the core of their heart. First realization which comes is that I am the soul. My true nature is soul. The second realization, if one is properly purified of false ego, then the next level of realization, you don't get this in Patanjali. Patanjali simply focuses on the level of realization in Dhyana Yoga that brings one to understand the true nature of the self. It's only when you get into Vaishnavism, where you, and particularly Gaudiya Vaishnavism, where they translate that to mean that first, the realization that you're the soul and not the body, and then because from a Vaishnava perspective, everything that is done in service to the Supreme. So then they get an opportunity to serve Brahman in a personal feature, which is called Paramatma. And then lastly, when that service mindset, when it's further purified and the service mindset extends to the Bhagavan, or the personal form or manifestation of Brahman, which is Param Brahman, the supreme manifestation, the source manifestation of both Paramatma and Brahman, imperishability, immortality, etc., then that is the highest level. That is called devotional service. And then one can engage in performance of service to Param Brahman or Bhagavan or the Supreme as he manifests in the form of Krishna or Ram or Vishnu, etc., etc. So I'm going to stop here. It's 8 o'clock. Thank you so much for your kind attention. I'll open the floor for some minutes, 10 minutes if we need. If anyone has any questions or comments, observations, realizations, please share it with us. Anybody?
Hare
Okay.
Krishna. Thank you for
Yes.
thank you for the wonderful class. I have a question about one's profession. You said like one should adhere to their profession, even if it's faulty, in process.
Right.
Like for example, like I'm a pharmacist, and there is no room for me to lie because if I lie, then I'm playing with somebody's life. So, and one other quality I have, and thanks to Krishna, that I cannot lie. If I lie, one would make it out like this person is lying. But there are some professions that you do have to make a lie, even if you like it or not. So is that okay? I mean,
Well, my grandfather once asked me, he said, what are you going, I was just about to enter into college. I was 18 years old at the time, and he asked me what I wanted to do. I said, I wanted to be a lawyer. And he said, And he said, are you a liar? And I said, no, Grandpa, I'm not a liar. He said, you'll never be a lawyer. So some professions, and even Prabhupada says that, the merchant, yes. You've been to India, you've heard it. Yes. This is the best and cheapest kurta that you will find anywhere in Vrindavan. I guarantee. And then you bring it
You
home and it
laugh
falls
at that,
apart.
but everywhere in the world is the same. We're being cheated all along, all the time, everywhere.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I'll come over to fix your plumbing. Don't worry about it. I'll give you a good price. Oh, well, I'm sorry, this is broken or that's broken. It's going to cost you double what I gave you. Yeah, you're right. So the tendency, Prabhupada says, for Vaishya, businessman, is to lie. And I wonder if I could find it really quickly. I have this quote about lying. It's really a good one. I don't know if I read it to you before. Let me see if I could find it quickly. If I can't, then it'll be for another day. Yeah, thoughts of the day. Okay. Oh yeah, here it is. Telling a lie is a sin for a child, fault for an adult, an art for a lover, a profession for a lawyer, a requirement for a politician, a management tool for a boss, for a subordinate, and a matter of survival for a married man. The person who wrote that up didn't want to put their name to it because their wife would probably beat them over the
Anonymous.
head with a frying pan. But in any case, that's that.
Would you pass it to me?
Yes, I will. I will definitely pass it to you.
It's great. It's absolutely great. Well, sadly great.
thank you.
Yeah. So
Prabhupada.
did I address your what you said, Bharat?
Yeah, the quote told me what I needed.
Thank you. All right. Thank you so much. You all have a very pleasant week. Have a happy, healthy, and holy week. Thank you
Hare
for spending the evening with me tonight and hearing Bhagavad Gita.
Thank
Hare
you for your
Krishna.
time.